Liberian Girl. Welcome to my channel. At the end of 2020, the wild year of our lives, I experienced the most gut-wrenching tragedy anyone could ever experience. I lost my baby. My husband and I were expecting. This was our first child together. We don't have any children. And when we found out that we were expecting, we were filled with so much joy, because that's what happens. Love, marriage, baby. And even though baby wasn't quite planned, what we knew was that we had a foundation. We had just bought a home, and we were on the trajectory to building a good life together. And so what more to motivate us than to bring a child created in love into this world? And so on December 2nd of 2020, I went to the doctor 6.5 months along for a routine checkup. And at the checkup, I was told that they could not find the heartbeat of the baby and that he was no longer alive, and that I needed to check myself into a hospital to deliver the baby. And so I went home in tears, and I packed an overnight bag and I went to the hospital. And on December 3rd at 4:36 p.m. I delivered a baby boy, still, and my heart broke. Since that tragic experience, I have been paralyzed by grief to the point of silence. May of 2021, on Mother's Day, I had the courage to share my story by writing my journey to motherhood and surrendering to grief on my blog on Medium. What that story did for me was, it was such a cathartic experience to write down what happened to me, and even more empowering to release it to the world. That started a chain reaction of women reaching out to me, telling me their own stories of stillbirth and miscarriages. And I was overwhelmed by the love and condolences that people shared with me, and the prayers, and just knowing that the world was so kind in recognizing what I had gone through. I recently came on to the 1-year anniversary of my loss on December 3rd of 2021, and I had a friend do this beautiful video for me and for all mothers, just expressing the difficulty of motherhood, and really calling on God to hold us in our connection and in our loss, and to carry on the story in our hearts that we have forever been changed by. And I'll share that video on the channel that you can also watch. But the grief had been so paralyzing that it was keeping me from doing what I wanted to do. And I did not begin to heal until I started to share my story. I come from a culture, Liberia, West Africa, where we in many ways are professional mourners. I think the Black culture in general, when we mourn loud, and the weeping and wailing and expressiveness of how we grieve can touch those around us in profound ways. Like, you feel deep sympathy for someone who has experienced a loss when you hear them mourn out loud. And culturally, across the Black diaspora, I think that's something that we do, and we do not hold back. So my culture in Liberia, we're like that. We will come together for days. Mourners will come from everywhere across the country to mourn with you for days on end, for a week plus into 2 weeks, crying and telling stories about the person and their connection to that person. But what I have noticed is, after that time or period of mourning is over, we lock our grief away in a box almost, and we move on and we never talk about it again. I can remember visiting my country about 10 years ago, doing a peace project with some children who were victimized by the war. Either they were drugged and made to be child soldiers, or some of them experienced abuse during the war, and creating a peace building curriculum and a safe circle process for people to share about their grief if they wanted to. And it wasn't until we opened up that space and made it okay to talk about the grief that people felt like they could open up about it. But prior to that, it seemed like people were walking around as if nothing had happened, as if a tragedy hadn't struck this nation. And to this day, there is no national day of remembrance or mourning, or where we talk about the war and promise to move forward in a better way. It's as if the war is a thing of the past, which it is, but there is no speaking of the past in a way that calls us to remember and to put our lives back together again for the better. And so I've been dealing with that, with some members of my family who have wanted me to just move on and to have another baby as a way of healing. But what I have found is that it has only been through the speaking and sharing of my grief that I have been able to feel better and to process and to move on and to recognize that I have been forever changed by this. This is a part of my story, but also I will not let it paralyze me. It is only through speaking about it that I have been able to do that. And so I just wanted to share that with anyone who is dealing with grief, that they've been carrying for a long time and have felt like they needed to be silent about it. However you deal with that grief, whether silence is your mechanism, or writing, or exercise, or painting, or whatever it is that you do to bring comfort and solace to yourself, know that you are empowered to continue to do that as a coping and processing mechanism, and to recognize that grief is a part of our existence. That when we grieve and we grieve hard, it's because we have loved hard or even harder. And that is nothing to be ashamed about. That is nothing to lock away in a box and to never talk about again. And I realized that I had moved from a place of paralyzing grief to living with and processing and making grief a part of my story. When I did this reel on Instagram at the cusp of the new year, I named some demons that I wanted to let go of, or wanted to fight or slay or dodge and keep in 2021 that I didn't want to follow me in 2022. And out of all the things I named, procrastination, comparison, worry, overworking at my 9 to 5, I intentionally did not name grief as a demon, because I do not believe that grief is a demon that we need to slay. I believe that grief is a natural part of the human condition. And it's not that we don't go through it, but it's what we do and how we live because of it that really matters. So I want to just encourage us as we continue to live into the new year, to name your grief, to not be ashamed of it. But something has hurt you. Only when you name it are you able to conquer it and to process and to live through it. Let it be a stepping stone into the bigger and better things that God has for you. How has grief changed you? Let's discuss in the comment section, and I will talk to you soon.